Welcome to the Unapologetic Heroine podcast, where myth is made manifest. As the author of The Way of Inanna, a heroine's guide to living unapologetically, this podcast is based on Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and war who embodies multidimensionality and lives unapologetically true to her heart. We showcase the wisdom of individuals courageous enough to do the same. These are inspiring stories of what it takes to be authentically who you are. My guests honor the wisdom of love, embrace the polarities of being human, and walk their truth. I am your host, Shauna Zalazo, licensed psychotherapist, intuitive channel, and author of the book, The Way of Inanna. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello and welcome. As an endurance athlete myself, I have been in awe of my guest today. A former professional Ironman triathlete from Victoria, British Columbia, since I heard about her athletic prowess and success over a decade ago. Janelle Morrison is a powerhouse. She embodies what it means to have faith in self, transcend fear, and be guided by an inner knowing. Following success as an age group athlete, Janelle went all in. She took a leap and left her job as a school teacher to commit to qualifying for and racing as a pro. Quitting a stable job, leaving the security of consistent income and benefits for the uncertainty of a career as an endurance athlete in one of the most challenging sports there is, one which is notoriously under-resourced and financially prohibitive, takes the temerity and deep belief in oneself that Janelle possesses. Nailing her first pro race with a third-place finish, Janelle became a top-performing Canadian triathlete with multiple top 10 finishes under her belt, reflecting her greatness to come. 1 year into her promising professional career, Janelle was in a near-fatal head-on collision that left her in a 10-day coma with severe internal damage, including a ruptured diaphragm, concussion, shattered ankle, fractured femur and pelvis. When she came to, doctors told Janelle she would never race again. But like Inanna, Janelle rose from a figurative death, defying limitations and mirroring the determination of the goddess of love. Against the odds, Janelle set her intention on resuming her pro career. This unbelievably inspiring story is documented in the film of her comeback, A Second Chance, the Janelle Morrison Story. After finally retiring from racing on her own terms at age 37, Janelle explored many different modalities and approaches to understanding the power of the human spirit, including shamanism and meditation. This exploration led her to kundalini yoga, and eventually becoming a kundalini yoga teacher and a mindfulness meditation teacher, harnessing her extraordinary capacity, drive, and determination into a path of self-love and the ability to help others to do the same. Today, Janelle is pursuing her master's in counseling, and I can't wait to see how she shares her extraordinary gifts with the world in this exciting new chapter. Welcome, Janelle. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sienna. Thanks for the humbling intro. I can tell you're a writer.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. Inanna is one of the earliest teachers of ascension, the capacity to rise and be reborn. This rise begins with her descent, her literal and figurative death. Your own descent and ascent are documented as stated in the film, A Second Chance. Clearly, there was something inside of you, Janelle, that insisted this resurrection was possible. And as I watched your film, I could see that inner knowing in the footage of your musculature, your body speaking its truth through the rehabilitation process and eventually your training. It was particularly discernible in the scene of you getting back into the pool. What was behind your drive to heal and return to the pro circuit even after you were told it was never going to happen?
That's a very good question, and one that I don't think I've got a single answer for, and I know I don't have a single answer for it. I think it was a blend of different parts of myself trying to make sense of what had happened and how I was going to move forward. And I kind of think of it as a bit of a blend of the shadow and the light of myself and my personality. There was definitely there was a part of myself that was looking for, what was possible. And, even that term possibility, it's such a broad kind of general term. And I just wanted to know, like, what could be possible if I didn't just listen to the limitations that I've been told, and even by people who, are very, white jackets or white lab coats and multiple credentials behind their names, and just venture off and see what I can do, and what my spirit wants to do. So there was that real lightness, and I think that was the powerful part of what took place. And there was also the shadow part of myself. I don't say shadow. I mean, I don't want to, I guess it's the only way I can really describe it now is that shadow part of myself, and that part of myself that was, more wounded, and had a belief in myself that I wasn't enough, and wanted to ensure that I wanted to prove to myself and to others around me that I was enough. And I think there were a lot of layers, and there was a real fear of vulnerability, of letting my armor down, and letting people know, and even myself know. I'm going to start with myself. Like, you have to understand yourself, or see for yourself that there are parts of yourself that don't want to be seen. And so, there were parts of myself that didn't want to be seen, and the fear of not knowing what the future held, and waking up in a coma, like from a coma, in a hospital bed, and people telling you that this kind of route, or this plan that you've had for your life is now not going to be possible. It was a terrifying thing, because I identified myself as an athlete. I had taken, like you had said, I left my teaching job, the security of benefits, a regular paycheck, and all of those things that we're kind of conditioned to believe are important, and they are on some level important, which is something I've learned. So I identified as an athlete because that was what I was like. If I'm going to do this, I need to be all in. That's what I'll say to that. It was like, this is a scary thing. I need to be all in, and then putting myself all in, and suddenly realizing that this wasn't maybe going to work out. It was like, no, I couldn't look at the possibility that it wasn't going to work out. And so it was a very all or nothing frame of mind, where it had to be this way, and any other way of looking at this was just too terrifying to consider.
Wow. So much of what you just shared gives me chills, because it is, and I love the use of the term shadow, by the way, because even in the mythology of Inanna, definitely she goes into the underworld to reclaim the shadow aspects itself. And there's this merging that is exactly like you're describing, this merging of the light and dark, but really that's just the polarities that exist within us. And I love that. I love your description, and the honesty with yourself of realizing, the other layers that were behind the motivation. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's so valuable for us to hear, because so often, that piece there, for when I hear you describing, recognizing that there was something that you wanted to prove to yourself and also to others, that to me is like, that's the rise. That's the ascent right there, is this recognition of, why am I really doing this? And really allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to hear that and to experience it and to be transformed as a result of that honesty with self. So thank you so much for sharing that. The accident occurred at age 33, which is a master number in numerology. And of course, many believe was the age Jesus was crucified and resurrected. So at 33, it really appears you opened to this massive initiatory process. Did the significance of that timing of your age occur to you while you were going through it?
No, not at all. In fact, I hadn't even thought of that before. I think the accident, I don't remember how old I was when the accident happened. Was I 31 or was I 33 when the accident happened, or when I started racing again? I actually chronologically lost.
Perfect. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's perfect for an initiation. We're sort of like thrown into like a spiral, and linear time doesn't really exist in initiatory processes. So that's perfect.
I think with that, I will say that, I wasn't in a place to be able to recognize any of that at the time. So at that time, I just, I felt like, oh yes, I recognized that there was something significant that had happened, but that significance, I had no idea what to do with it. And so for years, I wanted to be able to, I wanted to make sense of it. I wanted to understand what that meant. And I didn't, I had no idea, and maybe still don't. I mean, I'm not going to be to say that I know exactly what happened or why that happened. I don't, but I do know what I've learned from it. And it's taken time to have the courage to peel back the layers of why I did what I did and be honest with myself and confront some of those parts of myself. It certainly wasn't something that happened when I opened up my eyes after that coma. It was years and years. And again, still in a process, but I do have a very different understanding of it now, 10 plus years later than I did in those moments when I woke up from my coma.
Oh, bless you for saying that, because I think that's such an important piece for us to understand. So many of us will find ourselves in initiation. And to your point, the magnitude of it doesn't always reveal itself until we're ready. But it's very, very powerful. And certainly we know when we're sort of thrown into one, or it's at the beginning stages of one. I see so many parallels between you and the goddess Inanna, which is why I wanted to speak with you today, Janelle. Inanna is forced to give up all of her royal attributes at each of the 7 gates of the underworld she comes to before she can enter. This is in her descent story. And indeed, it could be argued that you too were stripped of your own royal attributes after the accident, going from being an elite level athlete who is fiercely independent to being dependent on the support of others, even to get to and from rehab appointments. You were definitely being called on to let go, including of the things that may have reinforced your sense of self at the time. One maybe less obvious manner in which you did this in the film, and which I found so fascinating, was making the intuitive decision to remove or let go of the surgically implanted hardware throughout your body when you began to train more intensely. And to get that done, you really had to advocate. In the film, it was really obvious. You had to advocate for yourself, and ultimately you listened to your inner guidance. Can you say something about that process? Because it seemed like once you did that, you gained access to a whole nother level, and even maybe deeper level of healing and actualization.
Yeah, the only way I can describe that, Sienna, was there really was an absolute knowing, and I don't use the term absolute very often because what is absolute? But that was the only way that I experienced that, was an absolute knowing that there was something foreign in my body that wanted and needed to be removed, and so there was a real awareness. There was almost like a sensitivity to what was needed. And I had a singular goal in mind. And that goal it was almost like, because it was so focused and so intentional, that whatever was in the way of that became clear. And so there was a beauty of that focus and that determination of what is needed to the next step, whether it's taking something away, whether it's adding something. There wasn't any lack of clarity in what those next steps were. And it didn't matter to me who recommended this or who recommended that. This was one thing not one thing, there was multiple things, but that was definitely a big one. So kind of the beauty of that light part of myself, the possibility part of myself that was so focused, that, the way becomes clear when the goal is so clearly envisioned in mind, the rest falls away. that's something I do know. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I agree with that. I think that's a level of discernment that you're describing that definitely it was clear you had it. Throughout the film, I mean, your discernment is really apparent. It's something that in my own experience in the marathon, as a former competitive marathoner, I thought I found so much of that teaching about discernment in the marathon itself, because the marathon, it gives you the capacity to know where to put your focus, when you're racing it at that level, where to put your focus and consciousness in order to succeed. And it feels like you're describing that with your decision about the hardware. You had this discernment about this is something that has to shift, and ultimately just such a beautiful process of letting go at an even deeper level. It was significant because this was, sort of symbolically, that which was put in you to help you to, sort of in a sense, reconnect that which was broken. And you realize, like, ultimately, I don't need this. It's really beautiful. It just struck me so much in the film. And also in the film, the incredible 6-time Ironman world champion Mark Allen is featured. And a segment that captivated me is when he talks about surrender. This section in the film is juxtaposed with the footage of your remarkable first race back at Ironman Canada in 2012. And we go from this beautiful discussion of surrender to watching you ascend the podium. Indeed, surrender is essential to Inanna's ascension. And Mark Allen has highlighted that it was through his own connection to shamanism that he ultimately gained access to the role of champion within. And I'm so intrigued that you were pulled to connect with the most well-known and maybe singular coach in the sport who highlights the intersection of sport and spirit. Allen has been very vocal about his connection to shamanism and his work with his own shaman teacher, Brant Secunda. As a coach of both sport and spirit, what did Mark Allen teach you about surrender, and how did you access it within yourself?
Oh, he gave me an equation. He emailed me an equation shortly after I had to DNF after a race. I don't even remember which one it was, and because I had plantar fasciitis, and it seems like so silly. Actually, plantar fasciitis is the thing that just took me out. But it was like my body had been compensating for so long that the injuries just kept building up, and came to a point where I just couldn't do the things that I wanted to do anymore. I couldn't train to the level that I wanted to train anymore. And there was a race that it was Challenge Penticton. That's what it was, and I just couldn't finish the run. I started the first mile or so, and I thought the pain was, even now I can still feel that pain. When the pain is something so entrenched in your mind and your being, you can still feel it years and years later. And it was so bad. I thought I can't run a marathon in this. I can't. This is my limit. I physically cannot do this. And he wrote me an equation, said total commitment plus total surrender equals great significance. And I couldn't understand what he meant. And I knew what he was saying was so important, but I was trying to understand it. And I'm kind of like a dog with a bone when something comes up, I'll just chew on it and chew on it and chew on it. And I did. For years, Sienna, for years, I chewed on that. And the way I would make sense of it now is that psychological flexibility of, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And yes, we can be committed to a goal, and we can be so focused that again, that beauty of like things come out of the way. Things are just like the layers are peeled off so that you can fulfill on that because your mind is so focused. And yet the psychological flexibility to work with what's here in the moment, I think it's something that I will spend my lifetime learning and practicing. My go-to, if you will, is to give her, just to go, and that was really conveyed in the film. But that psychological flexibility or that surrender was also something that was required not only to achieve the goal, so it became beyond the goal, but to have a life that I felt satisfied with on a deeper level. And I think really that's what it was all about. It was never really about was never really about winning an Ironman. It really wasn't. And I thought it was. I certainly did. But that part of myself that thought it was that part of myself that couldn't let go of it being anything other than what I thought it was supposed to be. So a very important equation and a very important piece of that part of my life, and continues to be. But the way I frame it now, the word is that feels right for me. I think that language is so important. And for some people it might be surrender, but for me it's psychological flexibility.
I love that. And certainly, as athletes, we're not typically wired for that psychological flexibility. You know, we tend to be wired to push and use our will to override the parts of us that are pleading to stop and give up. And it's fascinating to realize how strong and capable we can be when we develop that psychological flexibility alongside the capacity to push and challenge to ourselves. It feels like to me that this is very much what the path of ascension looks like, this sort of balance of that flexibility along with the capacity to push, to challenge yourself. So much of what you have come to learn about yourself and what you've shared with the world, Janelle, has come through your relationship to your body. And Inanna is a goddess who insists on her physicality, something that feels like an instruction in her mythology, like an instruction about how to use the physical body we have as a vehicle for our evolution. How has your relationship to your physicality transformed throughout your process?
One thing that I do feel strongly, I believe that we are all given certain gifts in this lifetime. And one of the gifts that I have been given is the gift of the physicality. So it's a continuing unveiling of what that physicality means and how I can use it for good. It was that my physicality, I think I knew there was I think I knew early on there was just an ease in which I could kind of do things. In high school, it was grade 9, grade 10, I was in PE class. I actually failed PE in grade 10 because I didn't show up. I just didn't bother. I wasn't interested. And then in grade 11, I took PE again and had a just really different mindset. I had discovered cycling, road cycling, that just really, in many ways, I would say saved me from making some really poor choices. And so that was early on, and that I recognized that there was something to this. And then the next year in grade 11, I applied myself and got an A. So it was like the fitness component was so easy. And I think I'm still discovering that. But then I would say, I was also very hard on my body for many, many years. And I felt like I could push it to do things. I believe that the more that I pushed it, the more that I would be able to attain. And on some level, there is truth to that. There is, especially as an athlete, like you said. I mean, you have to push yourself to those points where those edges where you don't know if you can take it anymore, and to physically get to that next level of fitness, but also mentally to be able to recognize, yes, I can do this. I think it's a very powerful thing. But in that pushing, that constant kind of need is the only way I can really describe it. Like, it felt like a need to just push to that next level. I was also brutally hard on my body. And even after the accident, like it didn't matter what, like I would ignore pain. And, again, as an endurance athlete or athlete in general, whether you're a weightlifter or whatever, I mean, you have to move through those levels of pain that you don't think you can tolerate. But I think there's a real, again, that psychological flexibility or that surrender to recognize when it's too much. And I was at a point where I was so attached to, and I'm going to use the word attached instead of goal, because there was an attachment to it. There was the goal and there was the vision, but there was also attachment to what it needed to be. And I was unwilling to let anything get in the way. And so very, very hard on my body. And what I would say in the last 10 years, Sienna, it has taken time, because number one, there's the physical addiction of it being an endurance athlete, where you're racing, you're training, 5 hours a day, and you're training for these massively long events. There's a physical chemical addiction that I would say would take place naturally. I can only really speak from my experience, but I think it's a common thing to become physically addicted to the need to get a certain amount of exercise. So I remember even when I did decide to quit racing and kind of take a different path, I really struggled. I had to really deliberately and consciously make choices to limit the amount of time that I spent exercising. And that was hard, because mentally and physically there were cravings. And it took, I would say it took about 2 years for those physical cravings to go away. And now over, since now it's almost 2023, I would say I'm in a very, I don't know if I've ever been healthier, in the way that it's not about I can eat this or I can't eat that. It's more what I know what to eat. I know what feels good, and I know what doesn't feel good. But if I want to buy a bag of chips from the convenience store, it's okay. And if I really don't feel like exercising, I've had a long day, and I know that exercise helps me to reduce my stress. It's the thing that I do to reduce stress. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to happen. And that balance, again, kind of that flexibility, that surrender to the moment is more apparent. And so I don't know if that really answers the question of the physicality, but I don't know if I do have a single answer. It's kind of many, many things, and constantly evolving, continually evolving.
Well, I appreciate your answer so much, because I resonate with so much of it, having sort of retired myself from competitive sport, and that what you're describing. And I've worked with folks in practice who go through just what you're describing. We become accustomed to a volume of exercise and training that is very hard to go and then sort of play in a reality wherein we're not competing. Like, how does this, what's the appropriate amount for us, and all of this? It's a very challenging rebalancing. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's such an important piece. It seems like, if you haven't been in this world, you might not understand how hard it is to let go of, because of that mental and physical craving. It's real. It is real, for sure. And personally, it took serious. It literally was for myself, it was in working with the energy of the goddess Inanna that helped me access that balance you're describing. And I love what you said, that you feel like you are the healthiest you are today, you've ever been. Congratulations, because that is a hard-earned feat, for sure. So one of the reasons that I love Inanna so much is that she teaches us what self-love looks like. In your journey, I see you as a teacher of this as well. What has been the biggest impasse you've come up against and perhaps needed to dissolve to open further to self-love?
That's a really good question. I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that self-love of being willing and or able to be with those parts of myself that wanted to stay in the shadows, were safer in the shadows. I think that the willingness, or the courage, really the courage to be vulnerable is what allows us to not only connect with other people, but also to be able to connect with ourselves. Obviously, we have to be able to connect to ourselves first. So that's how I would answer that question.
I love that. Thank you so much. And as we come to a close, I have one more question. In 2018, you created the Game Changer Heart to Rebuild Award. And I love this. This was an award for any Vancouver Island woman who was in the process of trying to overcome and rebuild herself. And whether this is still in place or not, the spirit of helping women celebrate their own journey is akin to working alongside teammates and helping each other to win as a whole. In fact, I've always read Inanna's mythology as emphasizing this very unity. And as she evolves herself, she shares all that she learns and she acquires with her people. We are entering a new paradigm. We are moving away from separation into unity. And I believe that an emphasis on collaboration is central to us achieving this. Is there anything you wish to share about your desire to celebrate other women who are in their own process of overcoming?
Again, a good question. I come back to, I want to kind of speak a little bit to the award. And I think when that award was put together, I was still unclear about what it was that I wanted to do to be in service of people or women or just people in general. I think it comes back again down to being willing or able to look at those shadow parts. And I want to be clear that I'm doing something that is with as pure intention as possible. And so I'm going to come back to the athlete part of myself that sought attention and sought to to have something be big. And I think that's a little bit like in 2018, as much as, yes, I desire and want for people to have that courage for themselves and that inner knowing and all these things that allow us to rebuild ourselves and that awareness. But I think it's comes back to my own journey of understanding and knowing why I'm doing something. And so when I first quit racing and I was teaching yoga and I was discovering new things, there was still this part of myself that craved to do big and significant things. And stepping back since I've come in to live with the North and just really, really stepped away from social media, stepped away from a lot of things. It's been a process of coming back to myself and going and looking at why am I doing things? And now as I'm in a middle school, I'm a middle school counselor, and I never thought I would return to education. I never thought I would come back to that part of my life. When I quit teaching, I was like, I'm in a totally new path that I'm going on. But just that recognition of I love to sit down in my office and be with a 12 or 13-year-old boy or girl that is struggling with whatever they're struggling with, whether it's something in school or something at home, their own self-confidence, and to be able to listen to them and have a conversation and support them through a difficult time in their lives, even if it's not maybe game changing, like a great, big, huge, significant thing. It's those small moments that give me more joy than I ever thought that they ever would. I always sought for big, and I think that big is there's nothing wrong with big, nothing wrong with small. There's beauty in all of it. But for me, I needed to come back and do some things that in my mind, at least, I had set them out to be smaller, and they're not. And so I think, I don't know if I really am answering your question, but it's kind of been a process. It's been an evolution of understanding how I want to be in service and support people. And it doesn't have to look one way or the other. And I'd always thought it needed to be a great big thing. And it still could be, can be. But the joy of those simple little things and those seemingly small conversations where, a student sees things one way and maybe they just see it just a little bit differently, or they see themselves just a little bit differently and just a little bit more of a healthy way when they walk out of my office, then I'm that's all I need.
Thank you for that, because for sure what that highlights is the permission to give ourselves the ways in which we can give ourselves permission to evolve. And that also, Janelle, is very central to Inanna's mythology. She doesn't like to be defined or limited by sort of pushed into a category. She's really sort of, she inhabits her multidimensionality in exactly the way you just so beautifully and eloquently described. So I really appreciate your willingness to be so honest about that. And again, another reason why I wanted to connect with you, because you really embody so many of these beautiful attributes that Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and war, embodies. That she is that heart-centered, unifying, truthful, unapologetic heroine, which I see in you. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for your time today and for sharing your inspiring story and your generous heart. And is there? I know that you are now working at a school, and that this is the beautiful process that you are in. If we are interested in finding any information about what you might be offering in the future, is there an area we can find that out? Would that just be something we would find on your website or anything like that?
It's such a good question, because again, even as an athlete, it used to be, oh, you can find me here, you can find me here, as many platforms as I could be on, or ways that I could be recognized. It was like, oh, I will do that. And so this, again, it's kind of been this unveiling over the last, or kind of uncovering of myself of the last few years, just like stepping back. So I'm not on social media at all, on any platforms actually, and I still have my website. It's showing, like, it's got a placeholder that has my contact information, just my phone number, really. But people can reach out to me just in my personal email address, Janelle Morrison 180. So 180 is intentional. It's 180, like, sit around. So Janelle Morrison 180 at gmail.com, super simple. And I would say that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then I am at a school right now. I've been working in a middle school for the last 3 years, just finishing school. And then now as I'm done school, just kind of, sorting out what the next steps are. And I really want to be clear with myself that I'm doing things for the right reasons. And, it's not to say that there aren't many parts of ourselves that can't be filled, but I want to be sure that if I do have my website live again, or, perhaps go into private practice as a possibility going forward, that again, I'm very clear about my intentions of why I'm doing it. So kind of just laying low for a little while, which is what I've been needing.
Absolutely. So, and I love that, because again, that gives permission to us all to go, wait a minute, what place am I in? Am I wanting to sort of go into that kind of cave, lay low sort of environment, or whatnot? Because there's such a huge push to be so visible. And anyway, I so appreciate that. So I also will just put a shout out to your amazingly inspiring film, A Second Chance, the Janelle Morrison Story, which is available on Apple. So thank you again so much. And to our listeners, just beautiful gratitude for your presence and willingness to be with us today. And may you experience fulfillment on every level with great ease and joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Unapologetic Heroine podcast, featuring remarkable individuals living their truth. For more wisdom on how to support your own journey toward honoring your heart and courageously alchemizing our world through the power of love, pick up my book, The Way of Inanna, A Heroine's Guide to Living Unapologetically, at booksellers worldwide.